My name is Amy Oakden. I am an estate planning attorney and owner of Oakden Law in Temecula, California. And I basically, the gist of what I do is helping my clients plan for death and incapacity. And most people think of the estate planning side as really that death planning, who's going to get all my assets when I die. But as we are starting to live a lot longer now, that incapacity planning is becoming more and more important. So, really excited to have my guest here today. It's Jennifer Bennett from the Key Home Care, and she's going to be talking about some of those key considerations that we want to take into consideration when either planning for our own incapacity or when helping a family member or loved one in the event that they become incapacitated and need a little higher level of care. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Amy.
So why don't you start out by just giving me a little bit of background about you, what you do, and then kind of the services that the Key offers?
Sure, absolutely. So, I am a care consultant with the Key Home Care, and we provide one on one caregiving in the home. We also provide the oversight of a care manager, as well as LVN and RN concierge nursing services. I have been in the home care space for approaching 21 years. So, I really pride myself with the fact that I am dedicated to helping clients thrive wherever they call home.
So with some of the services that you mentioned, so care manager and then in-home care services. So can you kind of touch on what the difference between those is?
Sure, absolutely. So a caregiver would come into the home and help clients with all of their activities of daily living. So everything that you and I did to get up and get going this morning, Amy, a caregiver can help a client with. So things like bathing, dressing, meals, light housekeeping, medication reminder. We do this with the oversight of a care manager. So at the Key, we really believe in supporting not just the client, but also the caregiver to make sure that there's that level, that infrastructure of support. So the care manager's responsibility is to be sure that the care plan is being followed and to make sure that if there's any changes in schedule or maybe there's unfortunately a decline in a client's condition, we have to revamp that care plan. So that's the care manager's role. Um, we also really advocate for, again, the support for the family. You know, this is a full time job for a lot of families to oversee their parents or their loved ones' caregiving schedules and care plans. So that care manager really can help support that way as well.
Okay, yeah, and I know we've talked about that in the past before, where which I think is great for a family member because a lot of times it maybe falls on a spouse or a child of a parent to come in and provide that care. But if they need 24-hour or close to 24-hour care, I know we've talked about the care manager or the in-home care coming in and maybe even giving like 8 hours so they can go out and grocery shop or
Absolutely.
get in a round of golf or go to the gym or whatever it might be, because that's so important for the caretaker to be taking care of themselves too.
Absolutely. It's such, I mean, there's a level of burnout. We see it. So it's definitely important. We encourage families to do that. And how best can we service that family, right? And we try to be as flexible as possible so that they feel that they also have a life beyond being a caregiver. We're always encouraging, I want to kind of take a step back, making sure that whatever organization is being used, that the caregivers are licensed and bonded, fingerprinted, background checked. It's really important. Families may not know that. They may want to hire, a friend of a friend, which we understand why, but we're really advocating for families to use a professional organization. It's really key when they're looking at caregiving services.
And then you also mentioned kind of a higher level of care, like an LVN or nursing care. What does that entail?
So sometimes a client may need more of a skilled level of care. So that could be IV antibiotics, or maybe they have a catheter or a colostomy or feeding tube, and they don't want to go into a skilled setting. We're able to come in and do visits by way of an LVN, a licensed vocational nurse, or a registered nurse, depending on the hours and the needs. So it's definitely a part of our service line that is unique for home care. Yes, we focus on the home care, licensed and bonded caregiving, but the LVN and RN definitely can be utilized when a client wants to stay in their home and has a higher level of need.
And then what is the difference between these services and, say, home health or hospice care?
Sure. So home health and hospice are covered by insurance, which is, I'd say, one of the big differentiators. Also, home health really applies to physical therapy in the home, occupational therapy, wound care, and essentially insurance will cover home health for about 1 to 2 months, maybe 1 hour, 2 hours a week after a hospitalization or a stay at a skilled nursing. Hospice will provide an RN to come into the home, and hospice does not necessarily mean end of life, right? But they will provide a nurse to come check in weekly. They don't do what caregiving does, and we don't do what they do. We really work together. But I'd say the biggest misconception is one's covered by health insurance and one isn't. And of course, we're there to do the daily activities where hospice and home health come in typically weekly and for a certain amount of time. And you have to qualify and have a doctor's order to really utilize your home health and hospice benefit.
So, would there be a situation where either home health or hospice would be serving a patient and then your company would also be there?
9 times out of 10,
Okay.
absolutely.
How does that work?
Yeah, so essentially, that home health again, a client would be coming home from a hospital or skilled nursing, and family realizes that, or healthy spouse realizes that they just can't handle the hands on care of their loved one. So we would either get a referral by way of perhaps the hospital or the physician or skilled nursing, wherever the client's at, or a professional like yourself may refer us in. And we would go out and meet with the family and we would speak to them about services. We would really work closely with the home health and hospice company to make sure that we're aware of the care plan they're setting forth so that our care plan works and coincides with theirs. So my care manager would be communicating with the home health nurse or the hospice nurse to make sure that we're all on the same page. Even though the nurse might be visiting when our caregiver's there, it's really not an overlap because, again, we're supporting the home health service as well as the hospice service.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned payment by insurance for hospice and home health. What are the, available means of payment for paying for a service from the key?
Sure. So home care is out of pocket, or long term care insurance does cover home care in home care. So if perhaps a client has taken out a policy, maybe with their financial advisor or with their employer for long term care, that's in place. We can bill the long term care company directly for services like ours. Typically, a client will have a daily maximum benefit of what they're allotted to. So we'll take that into consideration when we're creating the care plan. Otherwise, it is out of pocket. I do share with families, home care is a concierge service, right? I mean, this is an out of pocket or long term care insurance service. So we try to get very creative because we have to factor in the sustainability of cost. Home care can be expensive. So we always have to take that into consideration.
And then, what are some key considerations that we should all be thinking about when hiring somebody to come and either take care of ourselves if we need the care or taking care of one of our loved ones?
Yeah, so I'm always encouraging families to really interview the home care company that they are looking to use or to bring into the home. In fact, interview a couple of companies and find out what that company's infrastructure looks like. And what I mean is kind of what we touched on. Who oversees the caregivers? Who's managing the schedules? What happens after hours on a random Saturday afternoon if your loved one needs more care than is than it's typical on their schedule. So really find out who is the overseer of the care plan. I think that's key for families because what we don't want is to add more things to a family's plate, right? We're trying to really alleviate some of that stress and give them a peace of mind. So, yeah, who's going to oversee the caregivers? What happens after hours and weekends? Is there a long term commitment? So those are some questions to ask. And again, making sure that it is a licensed and bonded organization. I just can't stress that enough. You, as a client or a client's family, do not want to be the employer of a caregiver. You don't ever want to open yourself up to, God forbid, a lawsuit regarding lost hours or wages or benefits that you're not providing the caregiver. So that's why we really emphasize the use of a licensed and bonded caregiving company.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in hiring somebody that's not licensed and bonded, are you basically putting yourself at risk as of being their employer?
Oh, it's a huge liability, Amy.
Okay.
A huge liability. In the almost 21 years that I've done this, I have had families who have tried the other route and then, have come on to services with a company like The Key because they actually were sued.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's definitely a hard conversation, and families just don't know what what they don't know, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and they're getting a referral maybe from a friend of a friend, which we understand, but you are essentially the employer when you bring somebody into your home and have them work for you.
But going with a licensed and bonded and insured company, like
Yeah.
the key is the employer.
Absolutely. So we cover all workers' comp. If there's any, God forbid, a fall in the home, we're going to handle that for the caregiver. Family assumes no liability. We handle all of their payroll, take out their taxes, all of that. So exactly, they don't have any liability with regards to that.
Okay, great. And then you mentioned a fall in the home, so that made me think of the like safety measures that are taken when you have a family member who maybe is a fall risk or getting older and a little bit more,
Sure.
unstable. Is that something that your care managers would come in and kind of
Yes.
assess that situation?
Yes, absolutely. So we're using our eyes, our ears, right? Our nose, our scent to make sure that the house is safe. So the care manager definitely goes out to assess, to make recommendations of what may need to be implemented into the home to prevent falls. Maybe there's a loose rug or there needs to be a grab bar in the shower. So we're always looking for the opportunity to really help keep a client safe in their home by way of, again, the assessment, making sure that what needs to be implemented, we're making those recommendations. We really want to see our clients thrive. Like we talk about home care, and it's one thing for a client to receive the assistance, hands on care, the bathing, the dressing, but we want our clients to be really happy and thriving in their home, right? We want them to maintain their independence. So, again, I think that going back to misconceptions is, oh, I have to have a caregiver forever now that I start the service. And that's not the case. Maybe it's very situational. So, thriving is also a big part of the care plan. Yes, the safety for sure, 100% first and foremost. And then also, what does this client enjoy? What do they like to do when they're feeling, healthier or better? So, that's really our goal as well. We factor the thriving part into our care plan.
Okay. Well, and I like to know that I think a lot of people do think that once you have a caregiver come into the home, that's it. You're stuck with that forever.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, what happens now? And it's like, no, this can be very temporary. So,
Yeah. And then any other misconceptions that you want to touch on when it comes to caregiving and in-home care?
yeah, I think the cost through the years, it has increased. There was a time in our industry where you used to be able to have a caregiver in the home and what we would call a live-in caregiver for a flat live-in rate. And I'll give some rough figures, but maybe that was 250 a day, where you could have a caregiver again stay with you in the home 24/7. Labor laws changed, and so hourly is how we bill clients and how we pay caregivers even for night shifts. So there is no such thing as kind of sleeping on the shift any longer or having a caregiver spend the night. Literally, it's an hourly service. And I'd say that's a big misconception because, again, factoring in the price, it's like, oh, well, I can have somebody here and pay them a flat rate. And it just doesn't operate that way. So it has changed the cost of home care, I'd say somewhat significantly. So I think when we're looking at planning your estate plan and working with your wealth manager or financial advisor to really have um, some deep conversation about what that's going to look like and feel like from a cost perspective. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is somebody can still live in the home and really be there. And we can. I mean, they are employees and we have to be able to offer them proper time off and overtime wages and things like that.
Right. Because it's one thing to say in your estate plan, well, I want to stay in my home as long
Yes.
as possible. But it's another thing to actually be able to afford that and be able to finance that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
And then I know we talked a little bit about long-term care policies, but if there's a maximum, like a daily maximum on most of those, there's still a chance then with a long-term care policy that the client is going to have to come out of pocket for some of that cost, right?
Absolutely. So again, kind of dating myself a bit, I'd say that if a client had a policy that covered $7,000 a month, that's a significant amount. It's a good amount for home care. And that would have worked really well about 13, 14 years ago. That would have actually kept a client in their home with 24/7 care. But because of the labor laws changing, you're right, that daily max benefit might only meet half of what a client needs to truly stay in their home. So that conversation, again, with your financial planner, your family, of what that looks like, it should be considered because that, although be it a wonderful policy, and I tell my clients and their families keep those policies, keep paying the premium, do not let them go. These are like gold, these policies, right? Because I have some clients that are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cancel it. It's the premium's going up. And I'm like, no, don't cancel it. Whatever you do, don't cancel it. But so yeah, so you're right. There could be some overage. So to be aware of that.
Mhm. And then, what kind of things should a client be considering when determining, okay, is in-home care appropriate, or for my safety and the safety of your loved one, is a higher level of care needed where they maybe need to be placed in some sort of facility or home or something like that? And is that something that a care manager can help them determine?
Sure. A care manager can definitely recommend and again, constantly reassess where this client is. And again, if they're thriving in their home, is this home care service making sense? And until it doesn't, right, families and clients really tend to want to stay in their home. Fortunately, we do have options like assisted living, we have memory communities, we have 6-bed homes, we also have skilled nursing facilities. So it's really hard to say when the time is right. I think there's a lot of factors. Again, cost kind of drives some of that. Also, is this client isolated even though they have caregiving? And what I mean by that, are they only having 3 days a week, but they really need 7? And are they resistant to the care? Or cognitively, is it making sense for them to be in the home? Would they thrive in a setting where they're having constant stimulation and having the oversight of a memory community and the support and being with other residents who have their same diagnosis, doing activities and stimulation that way? So we factor in a lot, and I think reassessing is very helpful. So we do have these other services, that we can recommend, and there's other individuals in the community that really are experts in placement and things like that. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you. And then, as far as coming into a home and there is maybe a family member that is kind of taking the lead on the healthcare for a family member, what types of legal documents are you looking for from your side when dealing with the other family member who's in charge of somebody else's care?
Sure. So definitely power of attorney is important, right, for financial as well as health, and really being able to have some clear conversation with the two individuals to make sure that they're on the same page, whether it's a brother and a sister or whoever, could be, a friend of a family, whoever's in charge of the power of attorney, but really coming to the table and having that conversation of what does this look like. And I always typically say maybe we talk about the first couple of months. I don't think we need to get ahead of ourselves of where we're at because things change, right? So we kind of take the here and now, depending on what the situation is and what decision we're making for this client financially or physically. Having a DNR is very important in the home. So knowing where that is should be kept in the home so that the caregiver has that readily available as well.
Okay, can you touch really quickly on what's included usually in a DNR that you're looking for?
The do not resuscitate.
Hmm.
So, I'm well, essentially, if our caregiver does have to call the ambulance, let's say that a client has had a situation where now we're calling 911, they will always transport to the hospital. So that DNR needs to be readily available for the ambulance driver to give to them, to show them. But they will always, our caregivers are always directed to call 911, and then the ambulance will be able to take them to the nearest hospital that has a bed available.
Okay. And so the it's not like the DNR on the refrigerator means that nobody's gonna call 911.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, misconception again,
Yep.
misconception of like, "Oh, well, now what?" We're always directed to call 911, our caregivers are.
Okay. And then from there, it's up to the medical
That's
professionals what
correct.
to do with that DNR.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, again, safe, good place to keep a DNR then is somewhere readily
Readily
available
available,
on the
we have
fridge or counter or
we're
something.
in a care plan book, right?
Hmm.
But somewhere also where maybe if we do have a client that has some cognitive challenges, may not be able to access it and do something with it, right? It's gotta be in a safe space for the caregiver to have that readily available.
Okay. And then you mentioned the care plan book, which is something I really love. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, so we always encourage a care plan book, right? Where we talk about the phone numbers for the doctor, the emergency contacts, medication lists, um, and the hospital the preference of hospital, and also caregiver notes, right? I mean, we do a lot of this online now, but it's always good to have a book in the home. I tell families, create them. We definitely can create them as well and help families that way. But just a book where if, maybe you have a sibling that lives in a different state and the sibling that's local isn't around when they visit, somebody can always pick this up and take a look and know where that client currently is standing with care, I think it's super important,
Yeah.
especially the medication list. Keeping that updated is key.
Mhm.
Nothing more fearful than when you walk into a client's home and they hand you kind of a bag, a Ziploc bag of meds, and it's like, oh no, this isn't good. We got to figure this out, right? Medication mismanagement can be really challenging in our industry and not good for clients. So we're always, hoping that there's some form of organization for that.
Mhm. And so that care plan binder or book or whatever it is, that is something where anybody could just walk into the home, look through it, and be on the same page as to what's happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. Um, so we talked a little bit about kind of what we mostly think of home care as is like getting older and needing that level of care as you age and maybe can't take care of yourself or you get dementia or some other condition. But I also work with clients who have children with special needs. And a big consideration is as they're reaching adulthood, and putting together these special needs trusts
Sure.
for their children, for their soon to be adult children, um, having care manager provisions in those special needs trusts to make sure that there is a care manager in place, or at least the option for the trustee to hire a care manager. So, is that also something, a service that is provided by the Key?
So we definitely have our internal care managers that oversee all of our clients' care plans. And we work with life care managers in situations like this that have been designated or hired by a trustee or right a fiduciary, a loved one. And really what they are coaches of the football team. I like to kind of use that analogy because there's so much to navigate through and really giving the parents the peace of mind that how they want their child with special needs to be cared for and what services they'd like to use. I think the more planning ahead of time, the better. I think we're going to continue to see life care managers or aging life care managers put in place because it is, like I mentioned, a lot to navigate. Um, you kind of don't know what you don't know. So having that coach of that team to really say, okay, XYZ is what these parents want for their adult children. Let's make sure that this is being handled the way it should be, or this is the kind of service that maybe somebody that's not in the industry wouldn't even know is available. That life care manager can and does. So I think we're going to continue to see the use of life care managers or aging life care managers. And you bring up a good point. Services like ours, although 90% are for aging clients, can be for anybody over the age of 18 at the Key. So we provide those services for adults, right? Young adults, if you will. So that's good to keep in mind because sometimes there is an early diagnosis in your 30s or 40s. So services like ours can be used for adults, not just the aging in place.
Mhm. Or even maybe for like a disability that's not going to last forever, but you need
Absolutely.
temporary care at home to have that help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. And then as far as, going back to the, children with special needs, I think it's a big fear for a lot of parents that have a child with special needs that their child, as when something happens to the parents, is still gonna receive that same level of care that the parents have been providing all these years. And then also having that fear that, yeah, we have, like, a brother or sister that's gonna come in and they love their sibling, but they still feel this immense, like, guilt for putting
Sure.
that burden on their other child to have to take care of the child with special needs. So I think having that life care manager or care manager in place is huge for that.
Absolutely. And having the conversation and introducing the care manager, right? I mean, sooner than later, or the idea of it, so everybody understands their role. Nothing wrong with introducing that relationship sooner than later because it really evolves, right? I mean, clients' care plans change. Like you mentioned, the intent is there to have the healthy brother or sister help and pitch in, but people have jobs and lives or they get sick. So having that coach of that team to really advocate not just for the special needs child or adult, but also, again, respite and support for whoever will be in place, whether it's the aging parent or the sibling.
Right.
That healthy dynamic, preservation of a healthy family dynamic is so key. So these conversations are great because um, it does allow a peace of mind for everybody to know that it's not all going to fall on them.
Mhm. Well, and I think you kinda just summed it up right there, the preservation of the healthy family dynamic. That's pretty much exactly what you provide
Yeah,
to families, so I think that's great.
thank you. That's our hope.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's all the questions that I have for you. I know we've known each other for a few
We
years now, but I feel like every time I get together with you, I learn something new.
Oh,
So,
thank you, Amy.
yeah.
I appreciate it. I know you care so much about your clients. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
All right. Well, thank
Thanks.
you for being my guest.